I define religious shunning as the act of avoiding members who have been ostracized for a particular reason, whether they've been critical of leaders or doctrine. Members are instructed generally to not listen to them, to stay away from them so they're not influenced, and therefore they're shunned by family, friends, even close family members within the household. But then, you also see religious shunning occur when there is no instruction by the leaders. It's a kind of a fearful act out of members. For instance, I interview victims of Catholic priest abuse for a law firm. And just last night I was talking to one gentleman who has been completely ostracized by his devout Catholic family because he's decided to go ahead with this lawsuit against the LA Archdiocese, and so he's a pariah.
You mean his own family?
Yes.
After he's been abused?
Yes, so it's been a double whammy for this guy, and it's not uncommon to see that. And this, I believe, comes out of just individual fear. No, I don't believe that any parish priest or father is instructing these families to avoid them. I just believe that they're fearful of what it means to have a member of their family go up against a hierarchy that they revere and give total deference to. It's frightening to see people speak truth to power, often.
That's really shocking. I can understand, somebody speaks out about, criticizes openly a religion, but a child who's been abused and then does the ethical thing of making it public so that more children aren't harmed. How could a family, I just don't get that. Do you understand it at all?
Well, in this case, these are no longer children. These are adults our age. I mean, the statute of limitations was lifted so that people that were abused 20 to 40 years ago can come forward.
But that doesn't mean the perpetrator can't continue his criminal acts. In other words, maybe the kid is now 25. The child who was sexually abused is 25 instead of 9. But the priest may only be 45 and can still harm other children if nobody pulls the plug on him.
Yes, and in this instance, this gentleman had actually told people when he was a child, and it was they who remembered him telling that jogged his memory about him telling them, because he didn't believe he had told anybody, and usually they don't tell. Because why? Nobody would believe them, because priests and respected religious leaders don't do those kinds of things to children. And so it's, again, it's this fear factor that it's too hard, too difficult to face something so horrific. You expect these leaders to be godlike and to be the mouthpiece of God and to guide people correctly. And this just goes against everything that they've been taught or what they believe. So they just avoid it altogether.
You probably know a lot more about this with the Catholic Church and the sexual abuse. Were there many parents who supported the abused person making it public?
Sure. Yeah. But, and still that was a process of the victim having enough self-fortitude and maturity, doing a lot of processing therapy and all that to be able to even tell their parents, because they're afraid to rock their world and shake their own faith in the institution, whichever religious institution. I mean, sexual abuse certainly goes on in many other churches. It's just that the Catholic Church is so centralized in its power, in its hierarchy. It's a little bit easier for these things to be prosecuted, found out through records that they keep. They're extremely assiduous in their record keeping.
Oh, really?
Yes, yes.
So they have records?
Yes, they memos between cardinals, bishops, and priests. This is how the Boston story blew open, was because the Boston Globe was able to obtain documents, tens of thousands of pages of documents from cardinal law. And this is, of course, what Roger Mahoney is trying to avoid at this point, but this is another subject altogether. we were talking the other day, you and I, about your experience, and I was intrigued to hear that they actually instruct members to not read material that's critical of Scientology.
Oh, Scientology, yeah. To let our audience, to explain this, my husband and I had been Scientologists for a very long time. My husband since 1968 and myself since 1970, and I had seen changes in course materials that I thought were detrimental to the philosophy, so I wrote internal reports within the organization, which was taken in a not very good way, and I was expelled from the Church of Scientology. And our son, who had become a Scientologist, was told that if he didn't completely sever his ties to myself and my husband and his younger brother, who's completely innocent, had nothing to do with anything, that he would be thrown out of the church also. So he has not really spoken to us very much for about 4 years. So my husband was told that he would be kicked out. When they told me that I was going to be kicked out, they told my husband that he would be kicked out unless he divorced me and made sure that our younger son, who at that time was about 15, had no connection with me. I mean, this was so shocking. My husband couldn't believe it. He was thrown for a loop, that the church would actually instruct him to destroy an entire family, to cut a mother off from her own child. And I had not done anything of any kind of criminal nature. All I had done was write polite reports.
Criticism.
Criticisms within the church structure. This was not public criticism at all. So, pretty shocking. That's my story.
It is shocking, and I've heard this before from different sources, different experiences, different religious groups, and this is a sign of an authoritarian or totalitarian type of religious structure, where people who have valid criticisms of the leaders or of the doctrine, or valid questions that may prove to be, the leadership perceives to believe that may prove to be too volatile to let loose within the structure, to have it open for discussion, as it were. They've got to keep members away from such liberal thinkers, and so that's why your son has been instructed not to talk to you, divorces, and and that's what it really comes down to. When we're talking about it as religious shunning propagated by religious leaders. This comes out of a totalitarian kind of structure where they want to maintain control and what you're being influenced by. They want to control your behaviors, your activities, your emotions, and your feelings. They want to be able to exert some kind of control over your thoughts, your thinking, and especially information. And you had valid criticisms, I'm sure, and it was all for the better interest of the organization, I imagine.
Even if they were invalid. You
still should have a right to express.
What crime would I have to commit that would be worthy of the punishment of destroying my family? Destroying one's family is a pretty horrendous act. It's
and
like...
that's two main, don't do it. Don't exert criticism, just don't speak up.
Right.
Do as we say, or this is going to happen. And so that's a threat, that's coercive influence. And, there's Kohlberg, his stages of moral reasoning. He discusses how people mature in their ethical life. And at the bottom, you have people that need to be told what to do, that want to be told what to do, that respond to coercive and power as well as rewards, such as you see in the Old Testament. Do this and you will be my people forever, the chosen people. Don't do this, I'll destroy you, those kinds of threats. And then in the middle, there's this, a graduation of employing one's reasoning about certain doctrines. And at the high end of Kohlberg's moral reasoning scale, you have people that think critically, that evaluate philosophies or religious teachings, and you employ their own ethical reasoning to come to conclusions about it. Therefore, they're not dictated by anybody else's standard of reasoning.